Hi, my honeys. This is an impromptu little recording. A little bit more about me. Just wanted to chat to you off the cuff from the heart about why I'm just Melissa. All that I have to offer you is my story, myself, my experience, my knowledge that I've gleaned over my whole life, really. From the time I was a little girl, I started looking into the truth about things, the truth about everything. It's always fascinated me. And I came to realize at a later stage in my life that my life was all about power. It hurt me to know that so many people were powerless, true victims, completely vulnerable. And even when they were no longer children, that they still identified with that powerlessness, whether it manifested as lack of opportunity in their lives, poverty, illness, undesired emotional states. So many different manifestations of powerlessness. And I came to see that everything I've experienced in my life all formed a picture of how to harness more of our personal power, how to be truly empowered beings. So many of you have been so incredibly kind, generous, and gracious to me in your comments on my posts and on my recordings, all generally around the theme of how awe-inspiring and amazing I am. And I truly thank you for that from the bottom of my heart. But the reason why I wanted to make this recording is because I'm not special. I'm not. Life might have given me more opportunities to have to find my power in various situations. But I'm no different to you. I'm not stronger, wiser, or more whatever you might think it is than you are. Life might have given you less opportunities to have to harness more of your strength and more of your power than I've experienced. But that was because my purpose and my passion and my calling is to be a light for you. So in what ways could I show you where your power lies? Well, that comes down to what I know that I know, as well as what I've experienced. And that's so many vast and different things. So the more I tell you of my story, and the more open and vulnerable and honest I can be about that, the more you could see how I could possibly assist you in finding, tuning to, integrating and using more of your personal power. So briefly, let's start at my conception, which was a deliberate act by my mum. She got pregnant with me quite on purpose and even planned when I would be born in order to be a Scorpio like she was. You see, my mum was a very, very traumatized and broken individual. And she desperately wanted someone to love her. So I was conceived with that job in mind. She didn't want a child to love. She wanted a child to love her. So my first son was coming a month early, being a Libra like my granny, her mom, with whom she'd never had a good relationship. So that wasn't the best start. And then to add to that, the man she was married to, my biological father, expressly did not want children. So she got pregnant with me in spite of that, thinking that having a baby would change him. It didn't. My biological father was a narcissist. And so at 3 months, he abandoned my mother and I. and I never knew him. Apart from a little sojourn in my teenage years, as an attempt to find this man who had been built up to me by my mum, in the hopes of being loved and being my daddy's little princess, apart from a brief sojourn that was a dreadful mistake, I never knew my father. So I was the child of a single, very covertly narcissistic, I think borderline personality disordered mum, with no dad. So mum and I moved in with my granny and my grandpa, who were literally my saviors as a little girl. They were my safe place. My granddad was my father, and I absolutely adored him. He was the most incredible man. But he died in front of me when I was just 5 years old. Out of the blue, he had a brain aneurysm and literally dropped down dead. We were in the bar of their home, eating jungle oats, and he got up to fetch himself some Worcester sauce from behind the bar and fell down and died. It was an extremely traumatic night, and that trauma followed me for years. To make it worse, I didn't understand death. I wasn't allowed to go to the funeral. And so for 2 years, I waited for my grandpa, my Bumpy, to come home. I always used to do that. Every day, I would go and sit at our front gate next to the daisies and wait for him as he rode home on the train from work and would come walking down the hill, and I would see him and spot him and be waiting for him with his glass of Coca-Cola. So for 2 years, I waited for him to come home, because all I knew was that that big, loud, white car had taken my grandpa away and not brought him back. So I was 7 years old when I realized that he had in fact died and was not coming back. He visited me one night in a dream with a reassuring message and a message from my granny. But it started a very long grieving process that left me feeling very vulnerable, as the second man in my life had left. And my granny, my safe harbor, my anchor, was in a profound grieving process. So she also wasn't there for me. And as a little girl, I knew this. I knew I had to be all right, alone. I had to avoid the physical abuse that came from my mum regularly to the best of my ability. And I somehow had to be all right, in spite of all the emotional and psychological abuse that I received daily from her too. My mum was an incredibly critical person because she was hurting. And she was profoundly jealous of me, as crazy as that sounds. I was just a little girl. But I was always in a catch-22, where I had to be pretty so that it reflected very well on her, but not too pretty, because that was a threat. I had to be clever, but not think too much of myself. So speaking on issues of growing up with a narcissist and how to recover from all that damage is something I can definitely do. Then in addition to this, I was a very sensitive and empathic and sweet and caring little girl. I became very codependent. I must always be good, highly attuned to moods and danger all around me. And I lived with 2 alcoholics, both of my uncles, who would regularly get into violent physical fights, screaming and shouting. So I can relate to that too. I was 7 years old the first time I developed anorexia, when I realized that my grandpa had in fact died. I honestly couldn't eat any food. I wasted away over those 2 years. Later on in my life, I developed bulimia severely, revisited anorexia another 2 times, and had serious overeating issues that led to massive weight gain twice in between. So I can relate to that as well. As a young teenage girl, I managed to manifest so many of my dreams for myself, which if anyone is interested in, I will do a separate video on, only to have them ripped from me by my mom. So I truly lost all will to live. I really did, and was very, very and just risk-taking with myself. I met my wonderful husband when I was 15 years old, and he saved me from that state of being. But in the intervening years, I became physically very, very ill. I have faced cancer for the 6th time last year. I've had to overcome wall-to-wall bleeding ulcers, fibromyalgia, and many other issues that have resulted from my medical treatments to save my life. I am still, to be honest, in pain physically, daily. And I've been through pain physically that defies description. So I can relate to you about that as well. And also about finding coping mechanisms to cope with whatever you are dealing with in your life. How to truly be positive every day. Not in a toxic positivity way, which I will also do a separate video about, but to truly be positive from a space in which you love life. I have spent 25 years studying psychology. I am not a psychologist, a therapist, or a counselor, but I know psychology. I spent 14 years studying theology and comparative theology, so I know religions and spiritual systems and beliefs. And I can speak to that and assist you to see more of what universal truth is and where your power might be in all those situations. I know what it's like to look up to someone and think, I could never do that. I feel that way, in spite of everything I've gone through, when I come across a person who's lost a child. When I was younger, I had 2 miscarriages, and that devastated me for 7 years. So I cannot imagine what it must be like to go through losing a child. And I so admire the strength of people who manage to go through that. I also can't imagine what it must be like to have to live with a severe physical disability. To be blind or to be deaf or not to be able to walk. I can't imagine finding the strength in that situation, and I look up to those people so much. So no, we don't play biggest victim in the room games, because when you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. So even if you win that game, you're still the biggest victim, and who wants to be that? There is always someone who is worse off than us, my honeys, and always someone that we can look up to. So I hope this has given you a little bit more insight into who just Melissa is, and why and how I might be able to work one-on-one with you if you resonate with any of this. I truly send you so much love. Thank you for watching.